So you've been doing some 10 pulls on the current banner and you get 4-star Beidou. So in the last video yesterday, we did the basics guide for Beidou. So if you do want to go check that out, go watch it right here. We look at her skill, we look at her burst, we look at how her entire kit kind of works, doing a little bit of early game stuff. This is definitely going to be much more late game stuff. This is the Artifact Grinding Hell video, which is the name that I've appropriately given to this series of guides for mid to late game videos. So before we look at the actual Artifact Grinding Hell section and weapons, we're going to look at the current team that I have on the field with Keqing, Beidou, Nahida, and Jade. So Jade is in there as a party-wide healer just because I like running a healer. Also for the VV Shred, right, which we're going to be able to swirl Electro. Keqing is in there as my main on-field damage dealer with Beidou doing burst damage. Nahida obviously there for EM through her burst, as well as applying Dendro to the enemy so that way we can cause aggravate and spread reactions. Now, I have been very much enjoying this team. This team is actually pretty fun. Using Beidou's skill every single time that we can to build up energy for her. This is still running emblem set on Beidou, which we'll look at. Now, using Keqing's skill, I am kind of using Keqing as a, I'm going to use an air quote of battery here because she's not a battery, right? Beidou is having to battery herself with emblem, which we'll talk about in a little bit. So I was running Wolf's Gravestone instead of an ER weapon, but she still had 201 ER. And even then I was having to make sure that I would swap over to Beidou and use her skill whenever I could, trying to get that counter mechanism, right? So that way I could get enough energy on Beidou to be able to use her burst off of cooldown, reapplying Dendro with Nahida, using her burst when available, swirling with Jade when available, but mainly keeping Keqing on the field. Now, Keqing is level 70 with like a 2-piece Golden Troop, 2-piece Glad, so that's why she's not doing too much damage because she's not even built correctly. I just haven't worked on Keqing yet. I got her whenever I lost to, was it Chiori? No, I got her whenever I lost to Arlecchino. So yeah, I just got Keqing. So I'm still building her. Jade's level 70 as well. This is not a team that is fully built out, but I was greatly enjoying it, right? I loved having Beidou's burst to be able to use Keqing's normal attacks, which she uses anyway. I was opting to use Keqing's normal attacks instead of her charge attacks. This could be, I was having a lot of fun with this team. And I think that if I actually built out Keqing a little further, which I will do, as well as getting some more ER on Beidou, like swapping over to the cardboard sword, which I do later on in the video, this team could be a lot of fun. I very much enjoyed this team. However, Nahida belongs to Nilou as soon as Nilou gets a rerun, so I won't be using Nahida in this team again. I'd either be using Kale or another Dendro character to kind of help. I have C6 Kale. C6 Kale actually works pretty decent with Keqing. So here we have an example of an aggravate / spread Beidou team. Now, Beidou does need a battery. I'm using Keqing as a battery, not a battery. Fischl works a lot better, but I did want an on-field damage dealer, so I just went with Keqing. I do bring up, or I do show Beidou and Fischl together later in the video and several other teams. But I did want to just show an example of an aggravate spread Beidou team. And the reason for that is because Beidou's burst is special. Her burst, upon the initial activation of it, applies a lot of electro. Now, I don't typically talk about elemental gauge theory. I'd love to get into that in some other things. I don't want to necessarily talk about elemental gauge theory until I have a video on elemental gauge theory. So just know that whenever you activate Beidou's burst, the enemy that it hits upon the activation will be applied, will have electro applied to them or inflicted on them for a long time comparatively. That's all I'm going to say there. So it's going to be very easy to keep up the aggravate and spread quicken aura on the enemies that are hit with her burst. It's very easy for Beidou to keep enemies inflicted with quicken, so that way your other characters like Fischl or in this case Keqing will be able to get the aggravate reactions. So this is going to be, and for Beidou herself to get aggravate reactions. So this is going to be a good, I'm going to say good example of an aggravate Beidou team. Yes, there are definitely better options for an aggravate Beidou team. I was just very much enjoying this one. So Now we're going to look at the individual stats and artifacts and weapons on my Beidou. So we're going to real quick recap: attack 1800, EM 96, and HP 18,500. So her artifact set is a 4-piece emblem. This is my Raiden's artifact set. These artifacts are actually going to be fairly good. I've put a fair amount of time into my Raiden. So we are going to go through the artifacts and talk about what stats you want and what sub-stats you need to be looking for. For this specific use of Beidou, emblem is going to be her best set. So for Flower, I'm going to mirror myself so that I can look up here. For Flower, energy recharge, fantastic. Crit damage, crit rate, EM. The EM is going to be nice in an aggravate team. Outside of an aggravate team, you would probably want this to be attack percent over EM, but all of these substats are great. For the Plume, crit damage, crit rate, energy recharge, HP percent. Again, the HP percent, if it was EM or attack percent, would be ideal, but having those other three is really, really good. For the Sands, energy recharge Sands, crit rate 7%, crit damage 27. That flat HP, again, if that would have been attack or ER, even better. Well, it can't be ER. Attack percent for that HP would have been phenomenal. Getting that EM in there for the aggravate reactions, great substats. Could have rolled a little bit better, but still. Electro Goblet on set 2, attack percent, crit rate, crit damage, defense percent, or flat defense. If that defense had been energy recharge, perfect. Absolutely perfect artifact if that defense was energy recharge. A lot of my rolls went into attack percent too. Now, her circlet, crit damage with some crit rate, attack percent, HP, and energy recharge. A pretty fair amount of energy recharge. I wish that HP roll would have gone into attack percent or another crit rate roll. That would have been even better in my opinion. Again, this is one of those where if that HP percent had been EM, perfect. Again, so these are really good artifacts to compare to for Beidou or Raiden. For weapon, I was running Wolf's Gravestone on her because in this particular team, Kachin can even use the passive of Wolf's Gravestone. On hit, attacks against enemies with less than 30% HP will increase everybody's attack. So Kachin can even use the passive from this. Beidou can use the passive from this. You can get a ton of attack from using this weapon. Now there are going to be some other options and we're going to look at those as well. So for other options, you do have Serpent Spine, which is going to be good for Beidou because it gets up your crit rate if you have enough energy recharge, which I'm using Wolf's Gravestone. So this Beidou could use more energy recharge, right? Just a little bit more, but Serpent Spine is going to be good. It's going to get up crit rate. It's going to get up overall damage, but you have to have Beidou on the field for so long to get the full passive. So putting her on the field for 4 seconds at a time is going to be not as easy with running a different on-field Electro character, but she is going to very much enjoy that crit rate. Now, for a good free-to-play option that is craftable, you do have the Inazuma craftable Claymore, which gets up energy recharge, which is going to go great with Emblem. It's going to increase her skill damage a little bit, so like you'll be able to bring her on the field and counter will get a little bit more damage, but you really want the energy recharge as well as the second part of the passive, which gets her a little bit more energy as well. And it actually looks pretty good with her too. I'm not gonna lie, it looks pretty good with her. Now you do have Aquamaru, which is going to be very good if you have her on a team where your other party members have a very high burst cost. Like Yaimiko's burst cost is 90. You want characters that have that high burst cost, so that way it'll increase Beidou's damage. You also have Rain Slasher, which will be good, especially in this team because it increases damage against opponents affected by Hydro and Electro by 36% at R5, and it gets up EM, which is going to like for those aggravate reactions. Outside of an aggravate team though, Rain Slasher is not going to be as good. You need to have it aggravate for that EM to really help. And yes, with the introduction of some newer characters, there are teams outside of Aggravate that Beidou can do well in. Now, of course, you do always have the always wonderful Favonius Greatsword and Sacrificial. Those are just really good for ER. I'm going to say Sacrificial over Favonius because you have to have Beidou on field to get the passive of Favonius, whereas Sacrificial, if you reset her skill cooldown, then you can just do like back-to-back counters and get a lot of energy coming in for Beidou. And Emblem is going to really like the energy recharge as well. So now the next team that we are going to look at Beidou in is going to be the Tartaglia or Child Taser team. Now, I am not a big fan of this team. It is a very popular team to use Tartaglia and Beidou and Fischl in, but it's not my favorite. It doesn't help that my Tartaglia is like the most mid-built Tartaglia ever to exist. The thing that this party does do very, very well with, though, is having Fischl battery Beidou. Because Beidou is so energy hungry, having Oz on the field as much as you possibly can also be giving Beidou energy, well, so that way you can use her burst off of cooldown. Then you kind of just have to mitigate Tartaglia's cooldown on his skill, right? Having Benny buff everybody along the way with attack and healing. Fischl's going to like it, Beidou's going to like it, Tartaglia's going to like that attack buff. Everybody is going to like that attack buff. But I don't know, I don't particularly like this team. Child's probably like the biggest character, hot take, except for Navia, that I regret pulling. So like, I want to use Tartaglia, and I think that it's because it's Child, it's making me dislike this team even more, just because I kind of regret pulling for him. But that's beside the point. This is about Beidou. Beidou does do very well in this team, in this Taser team. In any Taser team, she can actually do really, really well. So if you have another Hydra DPS like a Yado, then you could just take out Tartaglia and put in a Yado, and have a Yado, Fischl, Beidou, and Benny, or Kazuha, or Sucrose, or not Sucrose, or like Jean for healing. You have a lot of different options that you can do for that last slot. If you need to use Benny on somebody else, or on another team for the Abyss, then you can swap some other characters in for Benny. But yeah, Ayato, or Child in this case, Beidou and Fischl do work fairly well together. Now next is going to be a team that I have become fond of since making this video, okay? Arlecchino, Beidou, Chevy, and Fischl. Now, I said that there are teams outside of Aggravate that Beidou can be good in. With the introduction of Chevy and Arlecchino, very, very good. This is a very, very fun team. I know I pulled up Arlecchino to go with Layla because in Layla we trust, but this team is a ton of fun. I really enjoyed this team. I threw it together kind of as like I wonder how this could go, and then I very, very much enjoyed this team. This team was a lot of fun. Having a little bit of a shield from Beidou's C1, because my Beidou is C6, can protect Arlecchino because you can only heal her through her burst, of course. But having Chevy in there as a healer and a debuffer and a buffer in this team is so fun. Having Fischl in there to still battery Beidou, having Beidou's burst to go with Arlecchino's normal and charged attacks are really, really good. Beidou is going to enjoy the attack buff that Chevy gives, is going to enjoy the resistance to Pyro and Electro drop that Chevy gives whenever you cause overloaded reactions. And Arlecchino and Beidou together make it very, very easy to cause overloaded reactions to keep the enemy resistance dropped. This is a very, very fun team. I ran this domain with this team quite a lot just because I was enjoying it so much. Yes, you can take out Fischl and put Benny in there as a secondary healer. You're going to decrease the team's damage and increase kind of Beidou and Arlecchino's team. Now, something else with this team, if you were to use Benny, and I should have mentioned this on the Tartaglia one, but I'm going to be mentioning it here. Beidou's burst does snapshot. So if you are going to do a team like this with Benny instead of Fischl, then make sure that you drop Benny's burst first, and then you go into Beidou and use her burst, so that way you are snapshotting it for the entirety of Beidou's burst. Make sure you Benny burst first, Beidou burst inside of Benny's burst to snapshot it for the whole duration, and then again before you use it again, drop Benny's burst down again, right? If you don't know what snapshotting is, I'm going to make a video on it at some point. Kind of like Elements of Gauge Theory, where I don't want to mention it too much because I don't have a video on it that I can refer somebody else to, but for people watching this video, they already know what snapshotting is. So this is a very, very fun team, though. I'm very, very much enjoying this team. And actually, I started running it in the Abyss, even though it's not fully built out, just because I was having fun with it, right? Now we're going to talk about a free-to-play option with Beidou being your on-field damage dealer. It's going to be Beidou, Fischl, Xingqiu, and like Sucrose, right? Now, Sucrose is going to be there mainly for the VV shred. Beidou and Fischl won't enjoy the elemental mastery gain as much. But with the VV shred, you can still use it. Using Beidou's burst with Xingqiu's burst for an electro charge is kind of like a taser team, but not really, kind of ish. But this can be a very, very good free-to-play option. As you can see, it's actually doing some fairly good damage. Beidou on the field getting that extra little bit of electro damage in her normal attacks, not infusion, but like an extra instance of electro damage. With Oz battering her, you're also going to notice how much Beidou's burst is ready to use off of cooldown. Because of having Beidou on the field, she's going to be absorbing all of Oz's particles, getting as much energy, using her skill as much as possible, making it much easier to keep her burst ready to use off of cooldown. This was actually a pretty fun team. I do recommend it if you're free to play, or if you're trying to do something like a challenge run, like Midori, who watches my YouTube videos. I think he's doing a challenge run with maybe like all 4-star characters. I could see him doing a team like this. To end the video off, I want to talk about Beidou's possible use as a Hyper Bloom trigger, right? Every time, every electro character is talked about aggravate and spread and Hyper Bloom. Now, Beidou is not a reliable Hyper Bloom trigger because her burst charges or electrifies between enemies. If the Hyper Bloom is not positioned in between enemies, it will not trigger the Hyper Bloom. You can trigger them reliably with her skill, but that's every several seconds. It's not like Kuki that is like every second and a half, or Raiden every attack. This is very much you can trigger it reliably with the skill. You cannot trigger it reliably with her burst, like Fischl. Unless the bloom is right next to an enemy or in between the two enemies where the lightning is passing between them, you will never, ever trigger that Hyper Bloom. Whereas Kuki's skill pulses out in every direction. Raiden, whenever you hit the enemy, it doesn't leather an instance of Electro, so it will hit the Hyper Bloom. She is not that good at triggering it. However, that does mean that you might be able to use her in a quick bloom team where you want the Hydra to be really slow and you have another Electro character triggering the Hyper Bloom, one that is fully built out for EM, allowing Beidou's burst to get the quicken, and then your other Electro character triggering the blooms. Like if you wanted to build Kaching full EM, or Kuki or Raiden or somebody like that, then that could be a very interesting team. I'm gonna have to kind of play around to see how that would work. Yes, Beidou would still blooms every now and then, but because she wouldn't be able to reliably and consistently trigger the blooms, your character that is full EM build would be able to trigger those blooms. So I'll have to play around with that and kind of see if I like that. Could be interesting. Now that is going to be it for this video. If you have any questions, do be sure to leave it down in the comments. Myself or someone else will be sure to answer it, and I'll see you in the next one.